Gene flow. Genetic drift is
First of all, I'm going to talk about something. I'm going to talk about the difference between vocabularies in daily life and biology. There are going to be at least 3 different vocabularies we will encounter today. First of all, theory, fitness, and finally, evolution. Theory in casual conversation could mean an idea. However, in biology, a theory is a hypothesis, a very big idea that can lead to others. Next, fitness. Fitness is, in casual conversation, is how strong you are. And, for example, weightlifting, these are all fitness. However, in biology, fitness means biological fitness, how well an organism can survive inside a community. And finally, evolution. Evolution could mean product evolution. For example, a telephone. A telephone eventually adapted into the Apple phones. That's product evolution. However, in biology, evolution means a change in a population's inherited trait over generations. Now, first of all, before we begin, we're going to talk about a story about Darwin. Charles Darwin, natural biologist, featured in the first video, The Tree of Life. Darwin Diaries. In 1831, Mr. Charles Darwin sailed to the Galapagos Islands on the ship the HMS Beagle. There he discovered a whole new genus, which is a classification, of finches, a type of bird. The extraordinary part was that despite having similar feathers and similar body parts, their beaks were very abnormal. Cactus-eating ones had long, dull beaks, and insect-eating ones had long, short, sharp ones. Darwin wrote this down, and years later he published the theory of natural selection in his book, The Origin of Species. This is a very complicated subject, and further reading and videos are also suggested. But we're going to talk about the conclusion here, about what is natural selection. We'll talk here. And you thought, here, Darwin published a very important theory of natural selection. He's going to be famous, right? Well, no. Turns out actually before that time, first of all, this theory wasn't famous. This theory was rubbish. Appeared to the Britain people, also called Victorians during that time, ruled by Queen Victoria. And during that time, the origin of species was a disaster. Not because it's wrong, it's very correct. These days, we have lots of proof, but because it sparked rage throughout religion. Victorian times, they were very religious. Even now, they believe in God, Jesus, Christ. Well, sure, religion is good, but sometimes they're too focused on it. So this actually ended up the theory of natural selection, or the origin of species, being criticized by even the queen herself. She declined knighthood, and the church even banned him access to society. This was a catastrophic result. However, years later, Darwin and his supporters used evidence and more evidence to prove that they were right, and that Victorian society believes were finally demolished. He actually also paved way for modern society and also even modern biology, creating a whole new branch of biology. For more information, watch the video on the Tree of Life. Now, the definition of biological evolution is already given here. See, a change in a population's inherited traits over generations. These are classifications, not the classification like domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species, not like that. This is a dividing. We have the biosphere. The biosphere is Earth, a living planet. Next is the biome. A biome is a specific type, a group of ecosystems. For example, the tundra plains. This is a biome. And also deserts, forests, jungles. These are all biomes. Next, we have an ecosystem. An ecosystem is a very small section of a biome. It's a slice of biome. Very specific. Next, we have a community. A community is a group of different populations of organisms. For example, in a jungle, that's the ecosystem, right? A very specific jungle like the Amazon rainforest. If we circle it down, a section or a region of it could be called a community. Let's say the river, a section of the river. There could be electro eels, piranhas, and snakes, anacondas, fish, and more. They're a community. But then we have a population. This is where we're going to mainly focus on. A population is a group of the same species of animals. For example, a population of tree frogs. That's an example. And then we have an organism. An organism is very specific, meaning one exact person or individual inside a population. For example, I am an organism. Everything alive is called an organism. Next, we have the organ system, organ, tissue, cell, and lots of other stuff. But we're not going to specify because this is all we need now. We're going to focus on population here. The following are factors and mechanisms of evolution. Here is a picture. Gene flow, mutations, genetic drift, and finally natural selection. Factors and mechanisms of evolution. First of all, gene flow. When new members of the same species arrive in an old population. Now, let's imagine there's a circle. Inside the circle, there are lots of frogs. Plain ones, pure plain ones with long, thick legs. Now, imagine we cut open the hole. We cut open the circle. And then let some new frogs let in. However, these frogs have spots on their backs. Have a very specific and very bright orange spots on their backs. Now we enter the circle. We close the circle up and all the orange frogs and also green frogs are mixed in. Next, we make them reproduce. Before, they only produced plain ones, normally, except for mutations. But now we have a completely new kind of gene that we can use. If there's no environmental factors around this, they could spread, and the ratio will probably just stabilize. That's gene flow. Next, we have mutation. Mutation is one of the main reasons. It could be due to radioactivity, and it could also be due to other factors. A change in an organism's DNA or genetic code, beneficial, harmful, or neutral. So, now let's imagine we have no orange ones inside the circle again, plain old ones again. We can use this by pressing a Punnett square. Punnett squares are advanced and also included in genes, genetic biology. So basically, if we write a Punnett square here, mainly all of them are going to be plain. Well, yes, most of the time, but at least in 99, that's 99%. And then we have the 1. What happens to the 1? Mutation. Third, genetic drift. But pure chance does not represent the original population. Genetic drift is a polyhydraulic dice, if you think of it. If we shake it, now let's imagine all the odds and all the evens represent something. Now, here 1 is total annihilation of at least 90%, say, of the original population of frogs. Now, we're going to put a crane, actually 10 cranes inside the situation. The crane immediately eats the frogs. And then we only have the 10% of the population. They could be plain, they could be orange spotted, we do not know. But anyway, they do not represent the original population because this is by pure chance. Some organisms survive just because they're pure chance. Very interesting. And due to also this means that our organisms, some of their traits could be unbeneficial or even harmful for them. Take the sunfish, for example. Most fish have a body, a whole body, like a really long body. But some fish, or also called moonfish, they don't have a tail. They only have a big flat fin on their back. This is exactly what happens because of genetic drift. Fourth, natural selection. Test an organism's biological fitness. And this means that they could sort out the best offspring. It's very important. Now here, natural selection, as we can see here in the picture, we're going to imagine a scenario here. Let's put a log, a plain old, say, brown log. Then we're going to put 4 different frogs on there. 2 of them are pure brown. 1 of them is pure green, and 1 of them is speckled with green, but also the background is brown. Now let's put a crane. Do you think A, they're going to eat the brown frogs first? B, they're going to eat the green frog? Or C, are they going to eat the hybrid? I'm going to let you think for a second. Now I'm going to reveal the answer. The answer is actually, obviously, the green one. And a pretty high chance the speckled green one too. This is because of camouflage. Natural selection is great because it sorts out the organisms. It uses pure chance. This can actually apply for lots of different ideas. Now, let's think of a woodpecker, 2 woodpeckers. One of them has a very long beak and one of them has a short stubby beak. Now let's put a tree with insects in it. Again, the long one has a better advantage because it's easier to access the bugs. The short one can't access them because of short beak. Then it dies out. The long one has a better chance of survival and then reproduces with, again, longer beaks. Then they have, their offspring will also have longer beaks, and this idea goes on and on. Until one day we have a perfect organism. An organism capable of surviving in its, say, biome. This is also why sometimes invasive species invading a new biome could cause damage. The Bermuda python. Nobody expected it. If it weren't there, the Florida would be peaceful. So, we're going to sum up on today's video. Evolution. Evolution is very hard. That's the first part. And also, we talked about the factors and mechanisms of evolution. Gene flow. When new members of the same species arrive in an old population. Mutations. A change in an organism's DNA or genetic code, beneficial, harmful, or neutral. Genetic drift. By pure chance. Does not represent the original population. And finally, natural selection. Test an organism's biological fitness in order to produce the best offspring. 好了。